Hello, hello, hello. How are you doing? Cheers, Kevin here, and I'm making this video to answer a quick question that I received on the last video talking about our mission runner. So I've got some code here that the commenter, let me check who the commenter was, Peter Larsen asked. So he was asking about how to make and use the events lexicon as part of the mission file, and particularly, how to access it. And he provided this code snippet about trying to figure out, like, well, what is the events stuff for? And he gave me this example, and I want to talk a little bit about it because it's a little difficult to answer over text. So I figured, hey, let's make a video and talk about this. So he provided this example of a candidate event. Now, if you remember the missions, let's look real quick at the missions. I apologize for the messiness of this stuff at the moment, but yeah, let's just jump over here. The way that I've set up the mission right now is we have this global herald mission is it's a lexicon that has a sequence, and the sequence is a list of names and functions, or function delegates. Now that we have anonymous functions in KOS, we can replace these with inline things. So I could say parameter mission, stage or whatever, which we may do in the future. And then we have this events lexicon, which is just nothing. And so it's kind of confusing. Well, what is the whole deal with how this works? And we haven't really used the events because we haven't had reason to just yet, which I guess means that I was designing stuff before we had to. But if we look at the boot file, this is actually used. The way that this works is you go run mission, which we get from the mission runner, and you pass it the sequence, and you pass it the lexicon of events. So if we were not to kind of structure this the other way, I would say run mission, and then I'd have some sort of list, and then I would have some sort of lex, and so the list of sequence would be like, launch, go to space, and of course these would have, their own functions, etc. Blah, 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 blah. And then we have this lexicon of events. And what are these events for? The example that I sort of gave was, let's say that you have a craft that you always want it to make sure, hey, if you have, if you are running low on battery, like let's say that you have a craft that's running mostly on internal power. It's got its the thing, and doesn't need its solar panels. Well, you might have an event called like power management. Well, power management. What the heck is wrong with me today? And these all take a parameter mission. So I would have a lex called power management, and this is as a function that then goes if ship electric charge is less than 5, then oh no, internal power is not enough, so toggle panels or panels on or something. But let's see, else if ship electric charge is greater than 100, or whatever number, then turn the panels off, because then we don't want to, they're unsightly, so we want to keep those things off. And the idea is that, the reason that this is separate is that it's not a particular step in the mission that you're running. It's just something that you want to do all the time. Another example, if you're running with remote tech, an example, let's say that you have some craft that is, orbiting out around Joule or something, and there are a couple of different satellites that it might be able to talk to, so that it can keep its connection. You might have a step here that goes, check if we have a connection. If we don't, try aiming our antenna toward a different relay satellite and see if that works. So it might say, like, try and find a target that will give us a connection, so that you don't end up where a case where one of your relay satellites is eclipsed by Kerbal, and then you go, oh no, we have no connection at all. So that'd be kind of another example of something that's not like a linear step that is part of the mission that you're running, but it's something that you want to sort of manage in the background. If you had the ability to sort of background, if you had like a separate CPU core, that might be something you'd put on there. So okay, the way that the mission runner works, and I have the code from the mission runner here. Let's go ahead and leave that. So there's some documentation, but it's a little bit confusing. So first off, it's going to save the run mode to the disk so that it can recover. If it has to reboot, it'll go like, oh, I was on this step, so I'll go ahead and continue on that step. What it's going to do is this main event loop, and it's going to say until it's done, which is some condition. It's going to find the sequence, and because this is a list, it's doing ×2 because you've got the name of the thing and then the function, then the name of the thing and then the function. So it's going to run these various things. But basically, it's going to run these functions in order based on its run mode. So when run mode is 1, then it's going to run the first function. When run mode is 2, it's going to run the next function, and etc. So it's going to first just run the one that's currently active, whether it's we're currently launching or we're currently waiting to be around the moon or whatever. Then it's going to go through every single event that is defined and say, all right, we're going to run all of the events. These are the background jobs that we want to run all of the time. Now, one of the rules when you're doing something like that is that it means that all of your sequences can't just be like, hey, let's do something and then just wait for 3 hours. Then you run into issues because then your events can't run. So let's jump back now to the example that I'm so bad with memorizing names that Peter Larsen provided for us. So here he has an example of a booster function, and we look. He takes a parameter mission, and then he's got when stage solid fuel is less than 0.5, then brakes on, which he said he's mapped to just jettison the solid fuel boosters, and that's fine, and then remove this event, remove the event booster. So the idea here is that you would presumably have something like run mission. I'm just going to do this all in line, and you have you have your list of sequence. Have here sequence, and then you have your lex of events. So let's go ahead and just throw this in. I'm going to paste this in line here, and I'm going to just use the anonymous booster. Just to keep this concise, I'm going to use the anonymous function syntax here. So we'd have something like this. So this would be one event, and you might have another thing, power manager, and then some other function, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, these all have to take parameter missions, but whatever. Then you have your list of actual steps. Now, the first thing I want to say is, it feels like to me jettisoning your first stage boosters is an actual step in your mission. This isn't an event that you want to constantly monitor, and this is something that gets a little bit tricky, and it's really kind of down to opinion. There are some people who really, and I've got examples in here as well, where we had an auto stager, and that would be an event. So an auto stager might look something like, let's see, auto stage, and would just say, if ship available thrust is less than 1 or something, and then would say stage wait a second, or whatever, wait 1, whatever the case may be. This way, because then it's not a defined step in our mission program. If you're thinking like, if you watch the SpaceX launches and stuff, you see all the little bits of the timeline. The question that you want to ask yourself, generally speaking, is that when you're designing a part of your script, is this something that if I had a mission timeline, I could find a slot for? Or is it something that's just, it's sometime on a continuing basis? One of the reasons that we had autostage is that we had various other things that happened at different parts. We had, we wanted to auto stage. We didn't want to. We have auto stage that happens if we're in the middle of executing a maneuver, because we don't know. We're not going, okay, well, we know that we have the right amount of fuel in this stage, so we'll execute the maneuver and then stage, or we'll stage and then execute the maneuver. We'll go, if it happens to run out of fuel while we're trying to run a maneuver, please auto stage for us, because just don't worry about it. It's like a background. Just keep checking, that sort of thing. So the first thing that I would ask is discarding your first stage boosters, I would think that would probably be an example where it makes sense to say this is part of the timeline, in which case then it goes in your mission sequence. So I would have, launch, which is, whatever that is, parameter mission, and then discard boosters, parameter mission, and, then, wait for apoapsis, and whatever that may be as well, and all of the rest of the steps in your timeline. The other thing that I want to bring up, though, so if that doesn't appeal to you, if you have other sequences, other steps in your sequence, and you really want this to be an event, then that's fine. But the syntax here is a little bit off, and let me talk about that. So I am very much against the use of when. This is kind of the built-in event system, but there are some problems with it. it's gotten a little bit better in that it used to be that basically anything within a when or an on block could only run for a single physics tick, which meant that if you tried to run too much code, there'd be problems. That's fixed now. But it does mean that things like local variables are a little bit messed up, that this stuff runs in the global scope, unless that's recently changed. But generally speaking, it's very hard to kind of keep track of what the heck is going on, because the idea with when is that you set up when whenever. You say, when stage solid fuel is less than 5, then print, oh no. And then you go ahead and you do more stuff. And when the compiler goes through it, it sees this, it says, all right, I'm going to just constantly check to see if solid fuel is less than 5. When that's the case, I'm going to print, oh no. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue running the rest of this code. Now, there's a problem here, and that is that this never goes away. As this is currently written, when solid fuel is less than 5, that means that until the program is done, it is going to check every physics tick to see, hey, is the solid fuel less than 5? Because then I got to do stuff, and it's going to run that over and over and over again. I'm sorry, I take that back. That's if you have preserve, and that's a whole, So that's a concern. Then it just becomes an issue of readability. So instead of what this is doing, so I mean I can understand what the intent here is. So you're just saying, when the solid fuel is less than 0.5, then we want to say turn on the brakes, and then we'll go ahead and remove this event, because this is something that occasionally you may want to do. Maybe Power Manager is only relevant during during your transfer stage or something like that. You want to be like, all right, we're going into low power mode, so you'd say, verif check power, whatever the heck you're doing in here, and then you might say mission remove event, because the mission parameter that you take in does have remove event and add events. You can add things in after the fact, after you've already gone ahead and run things, if there's a reason to do that. So I'd go ahead and say, remove event Power Manager, because we don't need it anymore. Of course, then maybe there's some other thing that adds the event back in as part of the sequence. But anyway, that's my example. So let's look here. We've got booster, parameter mission, when stages of solid fuel. We can rewrite this so that it still exists in the main loop. And this is, in fact, the whole reason for this mission runner, is that we have things like we need to check for auto staging, and we don't want to have to say this has to happen after we've tilted over, or after we've circularized, or whatever. So here's the way that I would write this. I would say if stage solid fuel is less than 0.5, instead of when, then brakes on, which is your staging item, and then you could say, mission remove event booster. So let's think about how this would actually work. Now, it means you don't have this discard boosters thing in your sequence, but you would have something like launch and, tilt. You have something there. Just presume I've written something tilt and whatever. Circularize. There we go. Thank you. And et cetera, et cetera. Now, that means that what's going to happen is first, the mission runner is going to go ahead, it's going to go, okay, I'm going to run the launch stage. That's the first part of the sequence. It's going to go through here, and because you don't do mission, and because it didn't see mission next, let's imagine that mission next is not there. It's going to go, okay, I run launch, and now I'm going to go through all of these events. I'm going to say, booster, let's check the booster. Okay, the booster, we ran that. That's fine. This if condition was not true because we had more than that solid fuel. Then it goes back to the top again. It says, all right, what's the current step in the timeline? The current step in the timeline is launch. So we'll go to launch again. So we might have now, so we'd say like if, I don't know, whatever the case may be, you'd say mission next. Then we go to tilt, and tilt may just be waiting until we get to a certain altitude to tip over. Right? So its job is to just angle us over off the horizon. We're starting up, going straight, and then we tilt ourselves off the horizon. Now, one of the ways that you might do this in kind of a normal way, you just say, wait until altitude or alt radar is over 50 kilometers or whatever. You can't do this now. If you're running missions in this sequence and events heartbeat sort of pattern, you don't want to do this, because what happens now is you say, so let's do that. Lock steering to... I don't know, I don't know, lock steering to east. Whatever we're locking the steering to. So this would be like if we're just doing this naively, we'd say something like this. This is the next step in our mission, say tilt. So wait until we're at 50 kilometers, then lock steering, and then move on to the next step. Now, if we do it this way, let's think about what happens when the mission runner's running. So it starts off at the top. Whoops. It starts off at the top. It goes, okay, what is the current sequence number that I'm on? It's going to go ahead. It's going to go launch. It's going to do launchy things, and then it's going to go, okay, next step. Before it does that, it's going to go ahead and say, all right, during this tick, I'm going to go ahead and run all of the events here. So I'm going to run booster. That checks, doesn't do anything, but that's fine. Then it goes, okay, we're now at the top. Now we're on step 2. Step 2 is tilt. So we run tilt, and now we're waiting. So it can't run the event. So it's trapped, basically. It's stuck in this wait. What we can instead do is just say, if out radar is less than 50,000, and then put this stuff in here. So now what's going to happen? Now we're basically introducing a fake wait. We're saying tilt, and then it'll go say the mission runner's going to go, okay, I'm gonna run tilt, and then nothing happens because that if condition doesn't match. Then it's going to go down. It's going to run the booster check. Then it's going to go ahead and run tilt again. It's going to run the booster check. It's going to run the boot, and it's going to go back and forth between those two things. It's just going kind of top to bottom through all of those steps. And then as soon as this is above 50,000, well, now we do lock the steering, and then we move on to the next step. And then it'll go ahead and it'll still run the booster logic. Once the booster logic goes, it'll go ahead and remove that event as well. But basically, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You don't need to use when and then and on to manage kind of backgrounded events. And I think this is particularly useful. I did say, yeah, that basically when does mean that you're going to be constantly checking for that thing to be true until it is the case, which is, performance hits that you don't necessarily need to do. The idea of this mission runner is that it allows us to define these background events that we can run during our mission. It does mean, though, that we don't want to use things like wait, because that means nothing else can run in our sequence. So you want to make sure that you structure your sequence to say, let's just not advance the mission number. Right? We'll not advance the current step of our timeline until some condition is met. So we're using ifs, conditional logic, instead of things like when or wait to manage all of this. So I hope that helps. I hope that sort of explains what I guess sort of answers your question. The recommendations that I would make is, one, just check and see if discarding your first stage boosters is a step that you can put in your timeline. It may not be. It may be that you have, you're worrying about, you've got a whole bunch of different angles off of the horizon that you're worried about that you need to actually, that are your main timeline, and your boosters just has to happen in the background while that whole sequence is going on. If it can go in your timeline, then it'd be much easier to just say, first stage, boosters, whatever. Takes parameter mission, and then you would just say, and you do exactly the same as you did in the event. If stage solid fuel there, then what did you bind it to? You bind it to brakes. Brakes on, and then you'd say mission next. So you don't need to remove this from the event loop at all. You're just saying, we've gotten past this step of the timeline, so go on to whatever the next thing is. And so then, while the stage solid fuel is greater than 0.5, it's just going to go, it's going to loop over and over and over again saying, hey, this is the current sequence stuff that I'm on. I'm going to run that. I'm going to run any other events that may be defined. And that's that. So this would be my primary recommendation if you can fit it into the timeline of your mission. If you can't, then that's perfectly fine. This would be kind of what you'd want to do in your events. You'd want to have, some sort of event. It takes in the mission, then it says, all right, if the stage solid fuel is less than this, then turn on the brakes, but then also remove me from the sets of events that are running every single time the mission runner loops. So hope that helps, and let me know if you have any further questions. This is something that I think we'll definitely be revisiting a lot, because I like kind of the structure of this, but I think we can clean it up a little bit more now that we are in KOS 1.0. So have a great rest of your day. Cheers.